this is Marta from Ruby Soup with Pearl Juice, and today I am giving you a book haul. More precisely, I'm going to talk about 20 new books that I have bought, so there's no time to lose. Let's dive in. The first book I want to talk about is a book that I just bought today, Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I purchased this from the English bookshop here in Stockholm, and because this was kind of like the world premiere of this book, they had special offers there. So when I bought this, I also got a free Turtles All the Way Down magnet, a special John Green bookmark, and a Turtles All the Way Down t-shirt. Now this t-shirt, along with that magnet and the bookmark, they came free of charge with the book. So I don't know if I'm ever going to wear this, but this kind of seems silly to say no to it. I have also recently purchased a Brazilian and feminist classic book, Clarice Lispector's Hour of the Star. This is about a woman who kind of like works as a secretary, what I can tell, and then she has a breakdown. And this is hailed as one of those classic studies of a female psyche along Jean Russo's Good Morning Midnight. And I am kind of getting into Brazilian literature right now, so this will be a lot of fun. Next up, I bought 2 picture books that are for children from the ages 5 to 7. They are both written by Päivi Hallström, and they are bilingual books, meaning that the same story is featured in 2 languages in these books, in Swedish and in Finnish. And so the idea is that children by this method will, for instance, be able to learn Finnish. So these are pioneers in Sweden-Finn literature. Sweden Finns are a national minority here in Sweden that are Finnish speakers. And a lot of us are just right now discovering our roots and getting in touch with our language. About half of Sweden Finns don't speak Finnish yet. And these books are trying to motivate more children to learn Finnish here in Sweden. This one is called Hillan Maailma, Hillas värld, and this one is called Resan till Finland, Matka Suomeen. And this is about a Sweden-Finn family that goes to Finland to visit their grandmother. And this is about a young girl who comes to Sweden but does not speak Swedish yet. And I am very excited about not only these books, but about this phenomenon. I am a Sweden-Finn myself. But when I was growing up, there was, despite that Sweden-Finns are about 5% of Sweden's population, there was very few stories featuring children like me with Finnish descent or children that speak Finnish and don't quite have they don't speak Swedish at home, they speak something else. So that presentation was a little bit lacking. And these kinds of stories, like the one in this and the one in this, these books could basically be about me because I came to Sweden when I was 5. I could not speak Swedish. I do speak it now, but I remember not being able to understand Swedish. And on top of that, when my grandmother was still alive when I was a kid, my family would go to Finland every year. Sometimes even 3 times a year to go visit her. So this is just like stuff that I've been through. And not only that, but I think like a lot of people my age and younger will relate to these books because these are stories that kids in Sweden actually have. You know, they have relatives in other countries. They don't always speak the language. So it's really important to not only have Sweden-Finn presentation, but just showing that Sweden is not only multicultural, but there's a lot of different languages being buzzed around. So just really happy about Päivi Hellström's writing, and really happy that Sweden Finns are starting to make a mark in literature here in Sweden. And next up, I bought Asperger Girls by Ruby Simon. This book is a non-fiction book about how, basically like a guide to life for girls with Asperger syndrome. I have Asperger syndrome. I've had this diagnosis for about 11 years. And Ruby Simon herself also has this diagnosis. And while I usually am not a fan and have not read that many how-to like self-help books about Asperger syndrome, because most of the time the writers don't really have that diagnosis. And because of this, they come off as very condescending and they make a lot of assumptions about how we experience things. But because this is own voices, the author herself has this very diagnosis that she's talking about, I think this book will not fall into those traps, and this will actually be helpful. And it talks about puberty and meltdowns, friendships, dating, even about getting old, navigating school, navigating depression, all that good stuff. So really looking forward to this. Next up, Naturlig skönhet by Nanna Johansson, Natural Beauty. This is a satirical comic book with little small stories here and there. And Nanna Johansson is one of the most popular satirical comic artists right now here in Sweden. She's really funny. I have read all of her other comics before this. She's hilarious. She does these really funny, like, satire on social media and how race and class and gender are perceived in the media and shown in the media, and how that kind of shows different biases there. And on top of that, she has like really funny, sarcastic one-liners they're actually, when I say one-liners, I don't mean that they're grating at all. They're actually really clever and really funny. So really looking forward to this. At a secondhand bookstore, I bought 2 Isaac Bashevis singers books. This was a Jewish writer. I can't remember if he wrote in Yiddish or in Hebrew, but he wrote in one of those languages, and he wrote about Jewish people throughout European history. So the Middle Ages, the 19th century, even the Holocaust. He dealt with all of these subjects throughout his writing years, and he won the Nobel Prize in 1978. This book here, Shoshha, is about the Holocaust, and this one right here, The Manor, this is about Jewish people in the 19th century. So really looking forward to these. I have read criminally little Jewish literature, so this will probably be very educational. All Grown Up by Jami Attenberg. This is about a unlikable woman who has no children and is about in her 30s, lives in New York. This is a 2017 release. So, it'll be fun to read something that's just was released now. And this has gotten really good reviews. So looking forward to this. Koirinkynnän leikkaaja by Veikko Huovinen. I actually got this for free because there was a woman who was cleaning out her bookshelf at a Finnish writing class I was at. And Koirinkynnän leikkaaja is about post-war Finland, about a mentally disabled man. He got a bullet in his head during the war, and it's just basically him trying to make it in Finland after the war with this disability. I have only seen the movie. I've seen it twice. It's one of my absolute favorite movies. So I am hoping that the book is as good, if not better. Usually the book is better, so really looking forward to this. Female Chauvinist Pigs, Women and the Rise of Raunch Culture by Arielle Levy. This is a kind of classical non-fiction feminist book. Arielle Levy is visiting Stockholm in about 2 weeks, so I am hoping to get this signed. More by Hakan Günday. This is a book by a Turkish author, and this book more is about a smuggler, a person who smuggles people across borders. I can't remember if he only smuggles refugees or if he smuggles just people who want to cross borders and don't have the papers to do so legally. But either way, he smuggles people across borders, and right now things like migration and the refugee crisis and people crossing borders so-called illegally, it's really like a hot button subject right now, and it's being really heavily politicized. And one thing that in all the political discussion is often forgotten is that these stories are about people just trying to thrive and to survive in a very harsh world. In fact, the world is incredibly cruel sometimes. I mean, it can be very kind too, but not everyone. Well, I guess I won't go into a discussion about that. But my point is just that we sometimes forget that in all the political discussions, people crossing borders and all that, it's human stories. It's about humans with hopes and dreams and bitterness and sadness and happiness. And it's going to be really fun or not fun, but it feels very important to read stories about these subjects. And I'm really looking forward to this book. Now here's another nonfiction book, Raskas Metalli, heavy metal. That does not translate very well, but this is another Sweden-Finn book. It's published in Sweden, but in Finnish. And this is a nonfiction book about Finnish men that came to Sweden during the 60s and 70s. And they came and worked in very harsh environments, like metal factories and such. Like very low paying jobs, very physically demanding jobs. And during the time in the 60s and the 70s, the Finnish language and Finnish people in general were very heavily stigmatized and disliked in Sweden. And for a long time, this was a thing that was not talked about very much, but last year there was kind of a renaissance in this, and there came a lot of books like the anthology Finnjävlar, and Eija Hetakivi Olsson has written novels that have actually tackled this subject about how Finnish people were stigmatized and treated during those times. And this is about 5 men who just talk about their experiences and tell basically their stories' lives, the story of their lives through interviews. So this is going to be really fun to take a look at. Now for something completely different. A picture book from Japan. This is called the Harguden Isopo, the hair god Isopo. And this is a Ainu myth from Japan. It is written by a Japanese author who comes from the Hokkaido Island. And on the Hokkaido Island, there is the Ainu people, which are like Japan's indigenous group, indigenous people. And they, for a very long time, they have been heavily discriminated against. They've been very heavily stigmatized. As usual with indigenous people, their culture has kind of been vanishing. But now things are kind of changing, and especially the young people, according to what I have heard, are kind of interested in rediscovering their roots. And this book is actually based on their folklore, and it is based on oral tradition, where animals kind of tell cautionary tales to the Ainu people. And especially like the hare was seen as an important figure in these stories and in these folklores. So this is going to be really fun to get into. I am really interested in Ainu culture, but I have only read news articles so far. So this will be really fun to get into. Another picture book. This one is called Mammas hår, Mom's Hair. This is a Norwegian children's book about a child and the child's mentally ill mother. And it basically tells the story of a child and a mother who struggles with her mental health, has depression sometimes, and just about how that relates to the child and her and how that affects their relationship. And I actually have read very little Norwegian children's literature, and also this subject I think is interesting. I actually have read some books on this issue, but I'm always looking for more on that issue, and this seems to be also very beautifully drawn. So, looking forward to this. Oh well. Next up, Good Morning, Comrades by Onyaki. This is a book that is very heavily autobiographical, but still a novel. Onyaki comes from Angola, and this book talks about the 90s in Angola when they had kind of a communist regime. And this is basically like his childhood memories. And this book, despite dealing with some very heavy subjects, is very well known for its very heartwarming atmosphere and being very happy-go-lucky despite harshness. So this will probably be a really delightful book to read. Looking forward to this. A Private Life by Chen Ran. Now this writer, Chen Ran, she's from China, and she's very controversial back there because she writes a lot of like what we would call confessional writing, and she has admitted that her books are very autobiographical or based on her own experiences. And especially this book, Private Life, deals with female relations and sexuality, like homoerotic sexuality. So it'll be fun to get into this. It's always fun to read queer literature that's not based in the. It's always fun to read queer literature that's not from the West, that takes place in other places. So really looking forward to this. And another Chinese writer, Kan Chui. And this one's called Genome Drop. I don't know what that would be in English. I'm sorry. But this is kind of like surrealist, absurd story about relations between men and women, where she kind of uses absurd storytelling in a way to explore these themes. And I love absurd, surrealist stories. So really looking forward to this. Alright. And two more books. Lydia Cacho's Makten Slavar, Slaves of the Power. Lydia Cacho is a Mexican journalist, and this is basically her whistleblowing nonfiction book. She kind of discovered this conspiracy. I don't really like that word, but let's stick with it. She discovered this conspiracy in Mexico where people in high power, like policemen and other men with high status in Mexico, were using trafficked underage girls as sexual slavery. And she discovered this and did a report on it in this book. And after that, she's had to flee the country. She's gotten lots of death threats. She's had to have quite an ordeal about it. And she wrote a memoir about it, which I already had. But I didn't have this. So now that I have both of these books, I'll be able to read them back to back. And finally, but by no means leastly, Inte ens tystnaden är längre vår egen by Asli Erdogan. Roughly translating, not even the silence is our own anymore. And Asli Erdogan is a Turkish writer, but also a reporter. She writes novels, but also does reports, journalistic jobs and columns. And she was just in prison before this book came out. This is actually a book that she was writing on, and she was finished with, it was supposed to be a longer essay collection, but she only got done with 50% of the essays. And then she got arrested and she went to prison for 136 days because she was accused of supporting Kurdish extremists. And Asli Erdogan herself has said that I don't talk about politics in my columns in my journalistic work. I just talk about people and about the different ways people are not seen and not treated well. And she had basically just interviewed some Kurdish people, and that had been a little bit too controversial, despite it just being basically portraits of people. And because she just got out of prison, I wanted to support her, so I bought this book because I think it's really important to hear what journalists have to say, and to make sure that they are not silenced. So that's why I bought this. Well, that's all for today. I have a big mess here. But before we say goodbye, I would like to know, is there anything that you guys would like to see on this channel? Is there any topics that you would like me to take up? Or is there any video game or any comic or any book that you guys would like me to talk about on this channel? Comment down below. I am open to all suggestions, so no reason to be shy. And if not, then just enjoy the video, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!